Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to the stream. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay. There always is whenever my camera gets started. Welcome. Sorry, I'm a minute late. I got a weird email from Patreon saying that the stream is going live in an hour, and I was like, I hope it's going live in a minute because that's when it's supposed to go live. But the post seems to be posted on Patreon, so we should be okay. Welcome everybody. This is the Monster Workshop. Every Thursday we stream for an hour or so, redesigning one of the monsters from 5th edition, specifically the monster we talked about in last week's Monster of the Week podcast episode, which you can check out on the link directly above me. Yeah, we talked about the Mind Flayer last week with our special guest Mythematic, an old friend of mine. Today we're going to talk about the sort of 3 problems that we highlighted with the Mind Flayer during that stream, during that podcast, and we're going to, on the stream today, try to find fixes for them and see if we can improve the Mind Flayer as it's presented. This one was a tricky one because the Mind Flayer, A, it's super iconic. B, I don't think it's like a bad monster. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and that's generally been true with most of the monsters I see here. There are a few that I think are a couple of stinkers that we've talked about in the past. Hey, what's up, Vaughn? Thanks for coming. There have been a few that are kind of stinkers, I think, or at least are kind of wasted potential. But the Mind Flayer, I think, is executed pretty well, so it's kind of going to be a challenge to find ways to improve it. But I have a few little gripes. The other big challenge with the Mind Flayer is that it has kind of been done to death to a certain extent, right? There are so many variants and iterations, several of which appear in Volo's Guide to Monsters, so we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Yeah, it's going to be interesting exactly what direction we take this in. We might dip a little bit back into 4th edition and talk about diseases, because I want to talk a little bit about ceramorphosis. Great, so let's tuck in. If you haven't listened to the podcast, I will do a brief summary of the 3 kind of problem areas and 3 potential improvements that we discussed in that episode. So the first thing we talked about with the Mind Flayer, actually let's talk about the Mind Flayer itself first. This is a medium aberration. Again, talking purely mechanics right now. Medium aberration, it's got 15 armor class, it's got all of its mental ability scores have saves attached to them, so int, wisdom, and charisma, so it's very good at resisting spells and things like that. It's got a bunch of skills, arcana, deception, insight, perception, persuasion, stealth. A lot, right? For a monster, that's tons. It's got dark vision, it's got deep speech and undercommon, and then telepathy 120 feet. It's got magic resistance, which makes it even better at resisting magical effects, in addition to all of its good saves. And then it's got a couple of innate spellcasting psionic type abilities. At will, it can do detect thoughts and levitate, and then once per day, it can do dominate monster and plane shift, and those are DC 15 intelligence based. And then it has 3 actions. It has 2 that kind of stack one on top of each other, and then it's got the one that's a recharge. So the tentacle is kind of its melee attack. Oh, there's a couple of typos in my stat block. That's fine. It hits for I think it's 2d10 psychic damage. And then if the creature is medium or smaller, it's grappled, and it must succeed on an intelligence saving throw or be stunned. So it's grappled and potentially stunned, which honestly pretty nasty. Then, as another action, it's got Extract Brain, right? So then, if it has you incapacitated and grappled, which, presumed that you're stunned, it can make a piercing attack against your brain. Actually, it doesn't make it it is an attack, yeah. 10d10 piercing damage, so pretty severe. And if that damage reduces the target to 0 hit points, the Mind Flayer kills the target by extracting and devouring the brain. So that's kind of your 1-2 punch scenario with the Mind Flayer, the only distinction being that it takes 2 rounds, right? It's action 1, action 2. In addition, it's got Mind Blast, which is kind of its AoE. It magically emits psychic energy in a 60-foot cone, which is pretty wide. Each creature in that area must succeed on a DC 15 intelligence saving throw, or take 4d8 plus 4 psychic damage, and be stunned for 1 minute. What's up, 2-Army Kid? Thanks for coming. Creature can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. And I think Mind Blast is kind of the heavier hitter of the powers the Mind Flayer has. Great. So that's the monster in a nutshell. Again, I think the last point to make is that it is a CR7. After all of that description, that kind of surprises you, doesn't it? Like, it seems like a pretty powerful monster, and I think that's one of the big things I want to draw attention to today with our first problem here, is that this Mind Flayer, as it's presented, it doesn't feel like a boss. It doesn't feel like the kind of monster that it sort of presents itself as. It feels kind of like, as we discussed in the podcast, kind of middle management, right? Like the Elder Brain kind of feels like the big boss, and then the Mind Flayer just sort of feels like somebody, working the punch clock. It doesn't carry the weight that you kind of expect it to. And so I think what we're going to focus on today is finding a way to take the bog standard Mind Flayer and elevate it to a level where it on its own could kind of stand as a mid-tier antagonist. You can still have the Elder Brain as the like end game boss, but it feels like a Mind Flayer could be tackled at like level 5, with like a capable party. And that's what you want to do with your Mind Flayer? I don't know. You could definitely run the scenario where a single Mind Flayer is CR7, and I think this is what they intend. And then if you want to have kind of a Mind Flayer focused campaign, multiple Mind Flayers, come in and you fight 2 or 3 of them at once. But even then, like, I don't know, that seems kind of underwhelming to me in terms of if you fought one Mind Flayer, you've kind of fought them all, right? So we're going to talk about doing a sort of souped up Mind Flayer. And on that note, we're also going to reference the kind of elephant in the room, which is the Ulithyrid. The Ulithyrid is found in Volo's Guide to Monsters, which the podcast kind of deliberately doesn't cover because we wanted to focus primarily on the monster manual itself and the monsters that appear there and what kind of a bog standard dungeon master who buys the 3 books has access to. It feels like things like Volo's and Tome of Foes and, the upcoming Treasury of Dragons are kind of responses to the monster manual in a certain way, and we wanted to start with the source material here. So while the Ulithyrid is kind of off the table for the purposes of the podcast, I think it is important to look at for the purposes of the stream, because the concept here is roughly the same concept we're going to try to execute. This is just kind of an arbitrarily more powerful Illithid. Their thing is that they've got 6 tentacles instead of 4, which you can see here in the art. The tentacles are also much longer, and the idea is it's kind of like the Mind Flayer that's on its way to become an Elder Brain, right? One of the Mind Flayers has to kind of ascend, and the Ulithyrid is the kind of likeliest candidate. Vaughn's got a comment. In my opinion, a Mind Flayer is a mastermind who commands minions. Combat encounter shouldn't be a solo monster, at least until you've cleared the mobs. That's a good point. That's interesting, right? Like, you could present, okay, here are the dominated creatures that come with the Mind Flayer, and then I think the bog standard CR7 Mind Flayer makes tons of sense. The only issue there is that I feel like it's that weird 5th edition CR question where, even if you want to add a couple of like relatively simple mooks to that fight, it throws the CR off so wildly that, unless it's a Mind Flayer and a couple of like hobgoblins who are not going to be a challenge to a party who can face a Mind Flayer, right? Like, I find the weird way they do CR in 5th edition kind of makes those types of fights where it's, a high level monster and then a bunch of lower level monsters not really function, because you're way too powerful to fight the low level dudes. And then, so if you're like on par with the Mind Flayer, you're too powerful for the hobgoblins. Right, but if you're on par with the hobgoblins, then the Mind Flayer is way too powerful. So it maybe is good for that like middle area of like third or fourth level, which again I think could work. But one thing Myth and I talked about was how if you want to run a campaign centered around a Mind Flayer and not necessarily around an Elder Brain or like a hive of Mind Flayers, right, a colony of Mind Flayers, that the one here doesn't feel like it's really punching in the weight class that it's kind of presented to be. But that's an excellent point, Vaughn. Another way to do that is to give it like a posse of minions, right? It does have Dominate Monster. It makes sense that it would be like slowly kind of accumulating all of these servitors. So that's definitely a route you can take. But the thing with the Ulithyrid, as it's presented in Volo's, is that it's not that much different. Like, they say it's a more powerful Mind Flayer, and it is, but it's CR9, so, we're getting closer to the target we want to hit. And it's got a couple of cool powers. Creature Sense is pretty nice. I think Psionic Hub is pretty meh. Like, it kind of means you have to include an Elder Brain, which you can do, but I don't know. I think I've used one Elder Brain in the entirety of my my history as a Dungeon Master, and I think Mind Flayers have featured in almost all of my campaigns at some point, and I've only used an Elder Brain once, and it wasn't even really associated with Mind Flayers in the way that I used it. So, there's nothing wrong with an Elder Brain. I think they're cool, but I think you kind of have to engineer almost your entire campaign around one if you're really going to do it justice. But the thing I think the Ulithyrid does that I really like for this is that it's got this innate spellcasting. Like, they've expanded the innate spellcasting way out. And so it's got a bunch more spells that I feel like are totally in mind. Confusion, Dominate Monster, Eye Bite, Feeble Mind, Mass Suggestion, Project Image, Scrying, and Telekinesis, which I think are also all great kind of psychic powers that you sort of want the Mind Flayer to have, and it just doesn't have, right? Again, I think the term that Myth used in the podcast that I didn't even notice until I was listening to it again is Vilithid, is the term he used, which I think for a villain, right? It's such a good portmanteau. That's kind of what I want to keep in my head, is the idea of the Vilithid, where this is a Mind Flayer that you could fight on your own as a party, right? Vaughn says, I also challenge the idea that every encounter should be CR balanced. You're right. You can meet scary things outside your weight class, and you should run away, or the Mind Flayer ignores you. Great. Another great way to do it, right? It's a different approach. If you want to say, okay, this thing is too powerful for you to fight, the only way to make that work, right? Mind Flayers may be interested in taking the party as servitors at that point. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I love the idea of encounters where you have to run away from, absolutely. But I think Mind Flayer ignoring you is kind of the only way to go there. The trick with the Mind Flayer is that the way its powers work, that's a death, right? It isn't there's no context in which a Mind Flayer would leave you unconscious. Maybe a Mind Blast and then come back when you're smarter. But if it's a brain, that Mind Flayer, unless it has a very good reason not to, is going to go for that brain. So, yeah, I think, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with Vaughn's suggestion here. I think that that's totally valid. I just feel like what I've always wanted from the 5th edition Mind Flayer is for it to feel a little bit more, not even necessarily combat capable, but I just feel like its options are super limited here in terms of what it can do. It can eat your brain, it can do one Mind Blast, it can detect your thoughts, it can levitate, and it can dominate you, and that's it. And that seems like a lot, but considering the imprint they leave in the world, I think the Ulithyrid gets a lot closer in terms of it having a suite of psionic powers. If you compare the Mind Flayer to a vampire, which is kind of where I think they are in terms of important in villains. Vampires have all of the charming and shape-shifting and summoning creatures and drinking your blood and all this stuff. Not even to get into vampires like Strahd, who can spellcast and call on the land and turn into all kinds of stuff. I kind of want the Mind Flayer to feel more like it's in that vampire camp. So that's our first problem is I don't feel like a CR7 is doing the Mind Flayer justice. I would like an option that is a little bit bigger. And I think maybe legendary actions is the way to do that, because action economy wise, if that Mind Blast doesn't go off, this Mind Flayer is in trouble. Avant says he really liked the Ulithyrid in his custom encounter. He ran away when it was obvious he was going to lose. That's cool. Yeah, you had success with it. What level was your party, out of curiosity, Avant? I know you've got a pretty kind of Slayer heavy power gamer party. Yeah, I was curious, how did they... Seems like they obviously triumphed if the Ulithyrid ran away. But let's move on to the second problem, and that is that there's a lot of discussion in the MM. Excuse me, my throat. There's a lot of discussion in the MM about the kind of cosmic origin of the Mind Flayer, and that, they were this. And we talk about this and kind of deconstruct this a little bit, but the whole narrative of the slaver race and how they bred whole populations so that way they could eat their brains. Not great, chattel slavery and stuff like that in your D&D. That's up to you if you want to put that stuff in there. 6th level, okay, wow. So this is kind of what I mean, right? That if a 6th level party can thrash a CR9, then that's again, I think Servitors is totally the other answer there and equally valid. But this is sort of, even the Ulithyrid doesn't quite have the weight that I want. Hey, what's up, Lex? How you doing? The Obliviacs from earlier editions. Yeah, so that's one thing we're going to talk about too, memory stealing and spell stealing on the podcast. Thanks for listening, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's something that I've done with them in the past. Any listeners of Yogg will know that our Mind Flayer PC, Zosh, at one point ate some memories, ate a brain to gain some knowledge that was important to them. Great. So what I was saying though is that there's one thing they don't talk about as much in the 5th edition Monster Manual is ceramorphosis, the process by which someone becomes a Mind Flayer. And to me, that's the real juice of the class, or of the monster, is the like horrible body horror, like Lovecraftian transformation. That it's this like slow, dreadful process of this thing burrowing its way into your ear and then slowly kind of turning you into a Mind Flayer. That's the cool part. That's the really scary part. And I wish that there was a, yeah, exactly, Vaughn, exactly. And that's what we're going to try to fight, is that action economy. Is the idea of the Mind Flayer, yes, as a deadly danger in combat, right? That's problem number one. But also the threat that they pose in kind of a more existential way, that they can turn you into more Mind Flayers, right? Like, there's something especially creepy about the fact that, like, there's this, the individuality of certain Mind Flayers is kind of up for debate, right? Like, once they all look exactly the same and they're kind of sexless. So there's this interesting notion of, like, not only do you turn into a monster and you lose, it's horrible and painful or whatever, but you lose your identity. You become this other thing that's kind of in thrall almost to the Elder Brain. So what I would love is and we've seen, it's funny that the timing on this is interesting, that like before I was getting ready to do this episode, I saw that concept art of the Elder Dragon. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's like a leak or a preview from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, and it's a dragon that has been implanted with or taken over by an Elder Brain, and it's absolutely horrible and marvelous, and I think it's great. And I think that's the kind of thing I would love to see, would be a sort of Shadow Dragon-esque template that we could apply to other creatures. In the podcast, Myth talked about the idea of like a Minotaur, right, that's been turned into a Mind Flayer. And if it's in that like weird, ragged middle state, you could see a creature that is still got some Minotaur traits, right, like the horn and the goring, but then also still has some Mind Flayer traits. So it'd be cool to come up with like a Ceramorph template, right, that you could staple onto other monsters. I know, and Vaughn, you're currently running it, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but I know that there are Ceramorphs in Icewind Dale, and that they're like gnome Ceramorphs, so they're little cute baby sort of Mind Flayers. But do they go into detail at all about like applying that to other creatures? Because if it's in Icewind, then we might not need to do it. But I kind of think it'd be cool to have that template. Awesome. And then problem number 3 is about devouring the brain, kind of what Lex was talking about. In the book, devouring the brain is just like pure sustenance. It's complete fluff. And that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with it again, but I think it could be improved by giving the Mind Flayer some benefit for doing this, right? Like, even if it's just a flavor thing, right? So they when they eat a brain, they, it just explicitly stating they gain all of its knowledge. So anything that the dead victim knew, the Mind Flayer knows now. If you want to go even further with that, yes, exactly. They don't just kill you, they transform you. And that is, I think, what is missing from the 5th edition Mind Flayer. There's no real discussion of how that could be done. Yeah, they don't. So then that gives me, I think that gives us license to do a Ceramorph template, right? Like a creature that is in the middle stage and has some traits of both. What a horrifying thing to like uncover on a Mind Flayer ship, right? Like a recently transformed creature that still has some of the weird old vestigial traits of the previous creature. That's cool. But the idea was to give the Mind Flayer some additional benefit for devouring a brain beyond just like yum, 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 right? It could learn secrets. I have toyed with the idea of, it gaining hit points back is kind of interesting. I think Zosh, the Mind Flayer in Yogg, because I wanted to make it like a more fun PC ability, not only did he get a chance to extract memories, it was kind of like a little mini game. He had to like search for them in the brain before it was totally digested. But then he also got hit points back equal to the intelligence score of the brain he ate, which I think is cool because, you can in flavor say, it likes smarter people, but if there's like a mechanical reason that it enjoys that more, like it gets more sustenance, it gets like temporary hit points maybe equal to the intelligence score of the brain that it just ate. Because it's pretty unlikely it's going to get a chance to do that multiple times in an encounter. So, yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking. You could go really far, and you could say that it also steals spell slots. But I think that, I don't hate that. I think, you know what? Fuck it. Let's put it in because, like, oh, cool. Vaughn's giving us a quote. For reasons unknown, seramorphosis can go awry when an illithid tadpole is implanted in the brain of a gnome. Huh. That's cool. So it's presented in Icewind Dale as though like an oddity about a gnome. This deviation might be due to the quasi-magical nature of gnomes or simply a facet of how their minds work. Okay, cool. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Vaughn. Appreciate it for running interference on that. Hey, Nuker Wolf. If they ate the brain, the rest of the Mind Flayers would know the secret if they are part of the same group. Ooh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's awesome. So this is what I mean. Like, I think we could delve a little deeper into what eating a brain means to a Mind Flayer and why they do it. I was saying that, like, I think fuck it. Like, let's say that if they eat the brain of a spellcaster, I don't know that they get all of the spell slots of the spellcaster, but maybe they roll and they get like they recover a certain number of them that they convert into like psionic. You know, maybe it's not even that they can like cast those spells, but if they eat the brain of a spellcaster, they can convert 1d6 plus whatever number of them into additional uses of their own psionics. Right? It's something like that. It's some kind of taking those two things and moving them around. I mean, there is something fun. Maybe it's more fun to say that it's the spell, because it's like, you know, if they eat the wizard's brain, then they can immediately convert it into casting Fireball, and that's not a thing you would expect the Mind Flayer to do. And that, I think, is more fun and chaotic, so maybe let's do that. I think that's neat. Okay, great. Awesome. So those are our 3 problems. This might be a long stream today. We're going to see. In the past, they've been, like, pretty short because the monsters aren't that complex, but here with the Mind Flayer, this is a lot more complicated. We might not honestly even get through it all before 4 when I gotta sign off, so we'll see how much we can do on the stream, and I'll do the rest myself. Yeah, Elder Brain Connection. That's awesome, Nuker Wolf. Okay, so problem number 1 is the Mind Flayer doesn't feel like a boss, and more like middle management. Let's assume we wanted to make like a souped up version of the Mind Flayer, and the Ulithyrid doesn't go far enough. So we're gonna come down here. Oops. If you guys can see that, and we're gonna go Mind Flayer, and I would love to brainstorm a few ideas of ways that we can sort of soup up the 5th edition Mind Flayer to make it like still obviously on theme, but a little bit more powerful. So if the goal is CR12, right? I think the big thing we're gonna need to fight, as Vaughn pointed out, is the action economy. Right, like obviously we still want the players to triumph when they face this thing, assuming that they're kind of appropriately leveled for it. But you know, I think a monster like this, if it's going to function as a mastermind, as sort of a solo monster, it's going to need to balance out that action economy. Right. I definitely think it could still have minions. I just wonder if it sends the minions at you first, and then when you get through the minions, then you fight the Mind Flayer. Right. Like I don't think this means it can't have thralls and stuff, especially if it's a big boss. It's going to have you know, underlings to do its dirty work. But I think in order to make it more of a threat on its own, right, I like the idea of it having legendary actions. I think is a good angle. Because again, it just makes it feel more like, all right, this is the big bad of the campaign. Legendary actions, for sure. I would like to increase its psionic spellcasting powers. And I would like to... I feel like the thing with Mind Blast that I don't love is that it's that recharge 5/6. You know, basically its options are to grab you with its tentacles. Ooh, look at that, Lex. That might be the other way to do it, dude. Honestly, maybe that's the answer. So Lex says, have you considered giving multiple Mind Flayers bonuses when they're together, like the idea of a Hag Coven, but because of their telepathic connection, or the Mind Flayer and their minions? That's pretty excellent. We might have to do that instead, actually. Let me read Vaughn's comment here, too. Why Mind Flayers hate... That's right, because they have this thing where they hate magic. My Mind Flayers are preserving knowledge that will be lost to a magical apocalypse. Okay, that's cool. It also, like, humanizes them a little bit, right? That, like, it's the ends justify the means thing. They're like, well, the magic apocalypse is going to destroy the universe, so we have to stop magic from happening. That's cool. Okay, how would we do that, Lex? That's really interesting. So would you keep the Mind Flayer as it is, like, as, like, a CR7, but then just say, if you get multiple Mind Flayers, it has this power? Man, that's cool. Let's look at the Hag Coven, because that might throw the whole thing out the window. Because again, then you kind of get to have your cake and eat it too there, Vaughn, right? Where it is more powerful, but it's can still have its kind of like either its minions or it's got a fellow Mind Flayers. So let's look at Hags. Because hags, I think, get access to just like additional spells, yeah, when they are together. I'm looking at my Hag Coven. You know, I spend when I do my work, like working on adventure prep, I almost always use D&D Beyond. But there's something about like when I record the podcast and when I do this stream about having the physical book in my hands. That's so nice. I just feel like most of the time now we don't use it anymore. Ooh, they could have abilities based on the amount of mind flayers. That's cool. Let's see. Hags. So the Hag Coven. When hags must work together, they form covens. In spite of their selfish natures, a coven is made up of hags of any type, all of whom are equals in the group. A coven consists of 3 hags, so that any arguments between 2 hags can be settled by the third. If more than 3 hags ever come together, as might happen if 2 covens come into conflict, the result is usually chaos. More psionics, increased DCs, just good old advantage on stuff, yeah. So hags have shared spellcasting, which I think you could do that, shared psionics, right? Like, call it like hive mind or whatever. While all 3 members of the Hag Coven are within 30 feet of one another, they can each cast the following spells from the wizard's spell list, but must share the spell slots among themselves. And I think you do the same thing, right? And, you know, they've got a bunch of folkloric thematic spells, Ray of Sickness and Bestow Curse and Phantasmal Killer and Polymorph and stuff. So we'd pick our own ones. We could maybe pull from the Ulithyrid list. For casting these spells, each hag is a 12th level spellcaster that uses intelligence, blah, 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 blah. And then they have a spell save DC. They also have an ability called the Hag Eye. A Hag Coven can craft a magic item called a Hag Eye, which is made from a real eye coated in varnish, and often fitted to a pendant or other wearable item. It's entrusted to a minion for safekeeping and transport. A hag in the coven can take an action to see what the Hag Eye sees if the Hag Eye is on the same plane as the... it's on the same plane, it's got hit points. They can only have one Hag Eye at a time, and creating a new one requires all 3 members of the coven to perform the ritual. Okay. It takes an hour, and the hags can't perform it while blinded. Cool. During the ritual, if the hags take any action other than performing the ritual, they must start over. Okay. Maybe damage to mind flayers can be spread out to its thralls instead of suffering it themselves and recharge on a d6. Yeah, something like that's cool. Like, I was like the interpose thrall thing. Okay, so let's discuss this. Or let me make sure that's like well centered and that I'm well centered. Yeah, I'm okay. I could be a little more this way. Sorry for the lag, everybody. Whenever I have OBS like maximized, like on my actual screen, my camera freaks out. But it seems like it's better if it's just minimized. Okay, or mind flayers function like a hag's coven, where they are more powerful the more mind flayers there are. So I think the trick is that the Hag Coven has the 3, right? That's how it works. Like there's a folkloric reason for it to be 3. Whereas the Mind Flayer doesn't really have that. You know what I mean? Like it has the hive mind thing. It does undermine that for sure, Lex, but like I kind of think this at least makes, like, this incentivizes me to use multiple mind flayers. Yeah, it could also work with the minions too. That was sort of what I was thinking. That might be a way to do it, to have your cake and eat it too, is that rather than saying, because then, yeah, I think that's cool. I think maybe it's, you're right. I think it's if this is like a template thing you add if the Mind Flayer has thralls, right? That these are things it can do with its thralls rather than it being, okay, multiple Mind Flayers together. Because, like, I agree. I think that's cool. But I think the problem you run into is that the Hag Coven has a very, like, set number of them, right? It's 3. You know what the CR of that is going to be because you could calculate it a little easier. It's always going to be 3 hags. You know, the most it's going to be 3 night hags. The worst it's going to be is like 3 sea hags. But with Mind Flayers, it's like, do you set a hard number and you say Mind Flayers tend to congregate in groups of, what, 5? 3 you don't want to use because it's hags, right? So it's like, it's gotta be something you can repeat, but doesn't rely on a set number. Because I feel like, how do you do that then? And I love the thrall thing Nuker Wolf brought up, and I love Vaughn's point about that, like, a Mind Flayer boss, like, would be more powerful beyond just
having minions, right? Because I think you could realistically increase the challenge rating, maybe not to 12, but you could realistically increase the challenge rating to like 10 or something if it has a bunch of kind of thrall-related abilities, right? Yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning right now. Or a Mind Flayer, an individual Mind Flayer is more powerful. So here's the interesting thing to Army Kid. It doesn't actually say. So it can cast Dominate Monster once per day, but like there's no, I guess the indication is that like, yeah, you know what? Can they have multiple thralls? Because it doesn't say anything about their Dominate Monster being able to apply to multiple monsters, right? Like, if they could do it once per day, great. Legendary action, ooh, Psionic Dissonance. Enters the touchstone within 60 feet of it, must make a DC X Insight or be confused. Ooh, spellcasting require a concentration check is baller as hell. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I don't know, 2 Army Kid. That's a really good question. Because, like, let me get Dominate Monster. I would get my player's handbook and look at it. Because I think Dominate Monster might be concentration. My understanding is that they can only, like, add 1 thrall per day, but there's no limit to the number of thralls they could have. That was my thought, but that might not be right. It might be they can have 1 thrall at a time, which, like, ugh, get rid of that. Okay, let me check. I'll be right back. Player's handbook. Okay. Like I said, man, there's nothing like having the actual book. Okay, Player's handbook. Dominate Monster. Oop, I should be scooted over. Here we go. Hello. Yeah, it's concentration up to an hour. So it's like not permanent, right? That sucks. Yeah, you can, I mean, you can control them and stuff. It's a good spell. Yeah, even if you cast it, it's an 8th level enchantment, right? And if you cast it at 9th level, then it becomes 8 hours. Yeah, I think 2 Army Kid is exactly right. I think what we should really be looking at is the Vampire's Charm, right? Because that's what we want. We want, like, it can function like Dominate Monster, but I think it has that that vampire thing where it just sort of lasts for however long, 24 hours or something like that. Yeah, for 1 hour. That's so, like, what? Ugh. How do you have a thrall then? Like, my understanding was that, like, a Mind Flayer could eat a brain, right? And then, like, it could extract a brain, and then, like, if the brain is out, then it can turn the corpse, essentially, into a thrall, right? Ooh, has the ability to maintain a portion of the brain? Because that's always what I thought it was. So the Vampire's Charm lasts for 24 hours. They can have many in one video I watched. A quest idea was the town was... Yeah, exactly. Right? Like, I think 2 Army Kid is closer with, like... It's something about eating the brain, right, that does it. They eat a portion of the brain. They eat the, like, personality, but they leave enough so that way they leave enough so that way they can be dominated. And I think you can put in something about how you can put in something about how, like, they could still be restored, right? Like, if the vampire, see, now I'm getting all my terms confused. If the Mind Flayer eats the whole brain, they're dead. But if the Mind Flayer eats a portion of the brain, like a greater restoration spell can restore it. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think it was if they didn't eat the brain. Exactly. That's what I remember from, like, 3rd edition. Do I have a 3rd edition monster manual? One moment, please. Shit, no. I just have Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. Shit. Okay, let me see if I can pull it. Oh, but it's not on the SRD because it's the protected oh, yeah. Yeah, that's cool, Lex. Yeah. If somebody can look, can somebody check the 3.0 Mind Flayer for me? I would do it, but my computer's got a lot on its plate streaming right now.
Could someone just check and see if that's how it worked? Okay, so we have a lot of ideas flying around. This is awesome. Let's see if we can synthesize these. So an individual Mind Flayer is more powerful with its thralls. So one of the things we have to change then, right, is give it a new power. When the Mind Flayer eats a brain. I gotta scoot over here. Sorry, I keep forgetting where my camera is angled. When a Mind Flayer eats a brain, it has a choice. Or extracts a brain. Yeah, Intellect Devourers is maybe the other way to do it, right? It can... Thank you to Army Kid, I appreciate it. I feel like Intellect Devourer is another good option, but I think an Intellect Devourer like retains an intellect, whereas I think a Thrall is like a drooling zombie. You know what I mean? Like it's not really a person anymore, not unless it's restored. You know, I think that's the difference, is that like an Intellect Devourer would make a good infiltrator because it knows everything the previous person knew and can kind of act like them and stuff like that, right? Whereas the Mind Flayer's Thrall is just like a body. It's like drooling like a zombie, right? It has a choice. It can either devour the brain and learn its information, right? Devour the brain and learn its secrets, so we can add that in. Or it can transform the victim into a mindless zombie. Or into a mindless thrall. The thrall does, like, obeys the Mind Flayer unquestioningly, but is, like, the thrall has intelligence 0, right, and obeys the Mind Flayer. Has intelligence 0 and obeys the Mind Flayer. But has no initiative and cannot act on its own, right? It cannot act on its own. If Greater Restoration is cast... if Greater Restoration is cast on the Mind Flayer, or on the Thrall, they regain their brain. They regain the rest of their brain. So it's like you can come back from it, right? It's a nice way to then... What's cool about that, too, is it's a nice way to introduce the Mind Flayer and, like, potentially a brain extraction without it just being your character is dead, right? It's like, cool, you're a Thrall now, and you can kill the Mind Flayer, right? But then the brain is still missing, and so you have to bring the, like, drooling Thrall back to town and get the cleric to heal them or do whatever, right? Like, it's a way to not just have that be a campaign or a character ending moment. Okay, so, but then what we do is, rather than like a Hag's Coven, we say that like a Mind Flayer with thralls is substantially more powerful, gaining a bunch of new abilities, potentially legendary actions, right? To utilize those thralls in combat. So I think Shadowrunners, who was it? I think it was Lex's idea, being able to break their concentration. So I think there's a thing where like Mind Flayers can have as many thralls as they want, can have as many thralls as they can make, but the more they have, the harder it is to maintain control of them, right? When they take damage, they have to make a concentration check, and on a failure, the thralls are stunned for a round, right? Like he can't control them for one round, or they can't control him. The more thralls the Mind Flayer has, the higher the DC. Right. So you could have a Mind Flayer encounter with like 12 thralls, and the point isn't necessarily to like fight your way through all of them. It's to get to the Mind Flayer and disrupt the concentration, because you know that DC is going to be super high. Or you could have a Mind Flayer with one thrall, right? And it's a big, tough, burly. It's a half giant or something like that, right? Like and the Mind Flayer is pretty confident in its ability to control this thrall because it's only focused on that one, right? That's kind of what I think. I think it can keep Dominate Monster as a spell, right? That it's like a brief thing that it does, but I think that this is how it makes thralls. Dominate Monster is not the way that it does that. Okay, cool. I like it. So when the Mind Flayer eats a brain, it has a choice. It can either devour the brain. So what does this all mean mechanically? Like, I think it definitely increases the CR. I don't know that it's necessarily CR 12 anymore, because I do like the idea of the power coming from the thralls. When we do thralls, do you think that they are, like... my instinct just is to turn to... So there are a lot of undead that when they reduce a creature's 0 hit points, they come back as a different type of undead. Do you think we do that, or do we just say that, like, their intelligence is reduced to 0, you know, they can no longer cast spells, and they, you know, obey the Mind Flayer? Because then it's like, I think that's good, because then if you do make, like, a hill giant thrall... Okay. Where did... Thank you, Jarmaget, I'm sorry. They are pretty protective of that stuff. You know, it is in the copyright, so I understand why you can't. Thank you for looking. I don't know where I got this idea about the thralls in the brain from. Okay, in 3.5 SRD, charm person once per day, tadpole implantation via touch attack. Ooh, that's cool. I like that too. As part of the tentacle thing. Yeah, interesting. That might be the way to do it. Although I think that's got to be like you're grabbed and you're held, and it's like whole thing. I feel like the tadpoles aren't just like living on the tentacles. Maybe that might be overkill, but it's cool that that's what they used to do. How did I not see that? Interesting. Okay, cool. Let's see what we want to do here. So it's currently CR 0, but I think 12 might be too high. It's just tricky because like with the Coven, I think they changed the CR of the Mind Flayer. So I think we could do the same thing, or of the Hag. So I think we can do the same thing where it's like, okay, a Hag on its own is this, a Hag and a Coven is this. Although it doesn't say it here. I know Kobold Fight Club lists how it affects the CR. Oh, here it is. A green Hag that is part of a Coven has a challenge rating of 5. So we could just increase the CR. Seems like it's by 2 in each of these cases. The CR 15, yeah, spooky. So then, ironically, if we increase the CR by 2, then it's CR 9. Oh my gosh, crazy. But it's tricky because it's like, you don't know, the CR is going to fluctuate per thrall, right? And what kind of thrall it has. This might be a problem too, because like the difference between saying I have a halfling thrall and I have a hill giant thrall, right? I mean, because I think you, in that case, you would have to factor in the actual CR of the individual monsters, right? It isn't just I have a number of zombies, it's that if we're going to do it that way. So one option is to say that there are thralls as a separate stat block, that you just becomes a thrall, right? And we do know at least that, like, yeah, if the target is, they have to be a humanoid, right? So we could have a rough approximation. I kind of wonder if we make a stat block that's thrall, and we just say it has this much strength and 0 intelligence, and they become this, right, until they're restored. I kind of think that's the answer, because then you can know for each thrall it has, it increases the CR by X amount, right? Something like that, yeah. So my instinct is to shoot for like CR, that it's CR 7 now, and CR 9. I just feel dumb because that's the Ulithyrid, right? My whole point was like, let's make a cooler, more powerful Mind Flayer, and then I'm like, well, that already exists, and it's in Volos, and it's CR 9. But I don't think this, I think this with the Thrall stuff is way cooler, you know? I dig that. So, CR 9 or 10, one of the two. The Thrall is a separate stat block that replaces the stat block of the original creature. Right? It's like a CR1 or something like that. CR1 humanoid. Yeah, using all the special attacks would be out. I think that's right. I think it's, yeah, they're just a bag of meat. Okay, cool. and they have to be humanoids, right? So this is like this implication, like maybe you were a big powerful dude, and if you want to, you could say, okay, you know, if it happens to a player, you could say, okay, you know, you attack this person for this, right? Like if you want to do it that way, or if you just want it to be an NPC, then it's just like a CR1 humanoid who's a Mind Flayer thrall. So here's the fun part. Let's talk about the abilities. Like what kinds of stuff does the Mind Flayer get as a result? What can it do with its thralls, right? I feel like each thrall should have like one little special ability it gets, right? Like I think thralls are immune to charm and exhaustion and stuff like that, right? Like they kind of function almost like undead. But we talked about Nuker Wolf, I think, had the idea of them absorbing attacks, right? Like thralls can absorb damage that would normally damage the Mind Flayer, which I like because if it's concentration, right, this is like the Mind Flayer's tactic to get around that. It definitely takes the Mind Flayer's reaction, though. It takes the Mind Flayer's reaction to interpose a thrall. I think the thralls are conduits of the Mind Flayer's psychic power. I'm like weirdly hearing music from somewhere. I don't know where that's coming from. Strange. Are conduits of the Mind Flayer's psychic power. Like I like the idea that a thrall can be the like point from which the Mind Flayer can cast spells, right? So like if the Mind Flayer sends a thrall, you know, miles away, then the Mind Flayer has telepathy within 120 feet of the thrall. You know what I mean? Yeah, no worries. Thralls are conduits of the Mind Flayer's psychic power. I think there should be a limit. The thralls can't venture more than a certain distance away. I think it'd be pretty far. It can't venture more than like a mile away. Ooh, cool. Thanks, Lex. That's actually really useful stuff where it's like, hey, there's another creature that already does this. You should check it out. Can't venture more than a mile away. The Mind Flayer can use its telepathy. Through them. I don't think it can do like Mind Blast or Dominate Monster or anything like that. Maybe telepathy and detect thoughts. I think we need like one more cool thing that they can do, right? I mean, like you could make a point that like in the legendary actions, you know, if the mind like, and I like the idea that like it only gets legendary actions if it has a thrall. If it's got at least one thrall, then it opens up the legendary actions for the Mind Flayer. But it's not like every Mind Flayer has legendary actions. You've got to have thralls to make that happen, right? So what's so like definitely a legendary action could be like, you know, it. Maragon. Thank you, Lex. That is very helpful. Let me go check it out right now. Is it in the monster manual? Or is it in a supplement? Because if it's in a supplement, I don't have access to it. You've already copying it. And then the fiend within 5 feet of the Maragon is hit by an attack. The Maragon causes itself to be hit instead. Okay, so you just do the opposite of that. Yeah. Don't they have a Brain Blast? They do have a Mind Blast, but I don't think that the thrall should have it. What if the thralls have like a death burst, like a psychic death burst? Like when a thrall dies, it causes a psychic death burst. And here we go. And the Mind Flayer can kill a thrall with a legendary action to trigger it, right? I mean, maybe it's actually not when it dies. The Mind Flayer chooses to reduce a thrall to 0, right? Can reduce a thrall. So that way it's like, can like kill switch a thrall with a legendary action to trigger a psychic death burst that, you know, it targets all creatures in a certain radius. You know what I mean? So then it's like it's the race is to kill the thrall first before the Mind Flayer can trip it with the legendary action. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, that seems right to me. Like they're okay, and then they have like a melee, like a slam attack, right? Like, or they could have weapons if they're given weapons. But like, you know, they're basically zombies that kind of like stagger around. Okay, cool. Nice. I also think thralls are good candidates for Ceramorphosis, right? Like the body is fine. There's enough there to nourish the tadpole. I mean, you could even make like, I know Mind Flayers have a lot of these, but you could even make a thing where like a Mind Flayer that is born from a thrall is like a subservient Mind Flayer to the Mind Flayer whose thrall it was, right? Like you could do that too in the lore. It's like a lesser Mind Flayer or something, a lesser Illithid. Okay, great. That's awesome. That's a lot. Let's maybe look at problem number 2, which is there's no way to apply this is the template, right, to make the Ceramorphosis thing. So, can someone, if anyone is willing to and has access to Volos, like, you know what? Let me see if I can do it. Actually, this might grind the stream to a halt because I don't think my computer likes it when I do a lot of internet shit. But let me go here in Volos and see if I can see if they describe Ceramorphosis in detail here, because if they do, then that saves us a little bit of work. We don't necessarily have to do it on stream. So considering how much time this is taking, this might just be kind of a brainstorm stream, and then I will go on my own time and actually do the mechanics. We'll see how much time we end up with, but this is a much bigger undertaking than I was I probably should have known it would be such a big undertaking, but I wasn't really thinking about it as how long it would take. But it's cool. I mean, these ideas are a lot better than I would have done on my own. It's so lovely to have such a big chat here for this too. I mean, I'm sure most people don't think of this as a big chat, but I'm a pretty small streamer, so let me get to where are the Mind Flayers? I thought I clicked on the thing. No? Goblins, hags. Sorry if this is messing with the lag. I'll get there soon, I promise. Here we go. So this is all like text. The importance of brains, scions. So yeah, here's a variant. Yeah. So maybe this is stupid, right? Because like maybe there's so many Mind Flayers that exist already. This is a lot more spellcasting. Ceramorphosis. Ugh. Look at its horrible eye. Oh my god. Ugh. No, it doesn't say anything about the process of Ceramorphosis. Grand design, controls, specific goals, Mind Flayer ideals and flaws and names, speech. Yeah, I love Qualith. That's one of my favorite things about it. Oh, here we go. Mind Flayer thralls. Let's see what they say. Interject tribe of humanoids use their superstitions and traditions as tools to make them useful followers. Send visions to a humanoid shaman, causing it to proclaim the Mind Flayers as emissaries of the gods. Just when a creature in with thrall requires the entire colony's energy and attention. Oh wow, making it no small matter. Okay. Although it takes only one Mind Flayer to perform the process. Directly involved in the process is required to donate a psionic power to the effort. First rendered docile through psionic means. Mind Flayer bombards the victim with energy that washes through its synapses like acid. Yeah, this is very complex. Retains their hit dice, hit points, and racial traits. All of his ability scores. Increases by 1d6. A new set of proficiencies, a new alignment, a new personality. Some colonies have learned how to salvage it. Because to me, it feels like this is what the Intellect Devourer is for. You know? Yeah. Best ever to use humanoids as thralls. Yeah, that's too much, I think. I don't need that. I don't need all that. Ugh. Look at that picture. My god. Mind Flayer layers. So there's like a paragraph on Ceramorphosis. But that's about it. Augmentations, treasure, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So that's too. I think we're gonna go with a more simplified version of the thrall, because the idea of like, okay, it's this huge process and it takes forever. It just doesn't seem worth it, right? Like, what is the benefit of that? Okay, cool. Yeah, just use an intellect devourer. Like, that's why they exist. So then, yes, then we can make Ceramorphous a thing. So I'm trying to figure out, like, 5th edition diseases. I might have to go get another book. 5th edition diseases are kind of different, but I think that's probably where we should be going to. I would probably, if I was running it, do it as a 4th edition disease, because I like how 4th edition did diseases. But let's look at 5th edition, and we'll just kind of go from there and have it be, this is what happens if you get this thing in your brain, right? Which, that, Ceramorphosis to me feels more like the thing that they're talking about with thralls, where you have to, like, capture them and put the thing in their eye and do whatever. Okay, let me grab the Dungeon Master's Guide. I will be right back. Dungeon Master's Guide. Dungeon Master's Guide. Getting the Dungeon Master's Guide. Okay. Let's see. So we're looking at diseases. I think are kind of in the ass half of the book. Let me check. I don't read this book very much. In fact, I've never read this book. I feel like there's not a lot that a Dungeon Master's Guide has to offer me in terms of advice. I know that sounds kind of glib, but it's less about my confidence and more about the fact that the only thing that has ever taught me is running the game. Okay, here's diseases. Poisons. Here we go. So they have 3 of them in here, and they're just a lot more like descriptions of what happens. Like 4th edition had this whole like tiered thing where you start here, and then you at the end of the day you make a check, either a heal check or an endurance check, and if you succeed, then you get better, and if you get worse, you get there. Which I like that system, but if we're in 5th edition, we should use 5th edition mechanics. So like let's just look at what's the shortest one. Sewer plague. So the description of it is a generic term for a broad category of illnesses. When a humanoid creature is bitten. Did I just lose stream? Am I still here? Okay, cool. Just checking. I heard sometimes I hear a little bloop noise from OBS when it's mad at me. When a humanoid creature is bitten by a creature that carries the disease, so the conditions under which you get it, they succeed on a Constitution saving throw or become infected. It takes 1d4 days for the sewer plague's symptoms to manifest. They include fatigue and cramps. They suffer 1 level of exhaustion, and it retains only half the normal number of hit points from spending hit dice and no points from finishing a long rest. At the end of each long rest, an infected creature must make a DC 11 Constitution saving throw. So, okay, I think what we need to figure out is, like, what does Ceramorphosis do to you mechanically, right? I wonder if it's a thing where, like, each day that you have it, right? Ceramorphosis. Each day that you have it, you can't be... Ooh, slide tadpoles are a great idea. Yep. Can't be infected by it. You have to be infested, right? Infected. Instead, you are infected with a tadpole. So there's no save you make, right? There's no save you make. You can't, like, resist it. It's the only context in which it can be done. Like, you must be incapacitated when they implant the tadpole, and therefore you cannot resist it, right? It's not like, okay, you make a con save and then, you have to be in such a state where it can just implant it. But let's look at slide tadpoles, actually, because that's a good call, Nuker Wolf. I'm running out of space in the world to put all the books I need to look at. So we'll just swap these two and look at slide tadpoles. I never use slod. I don't think I've ever used a single one. I gotta change that. I gotta find a place to put slod in the world. They're just so extra planar that it's hard for me to figure them out. Slod tadpoles. Orphic cycles of reproduction. Okay, cool. Here we go. If the target is a humanoid, it must succeed on a DC 14 Constitution save or be infected with a disease, a minuscule slod egg. A human host can carry only 1 slod egg to term at a time. For 3 months, the egg moves to the chest cavity, gestates, and forms a slod tadpole. In the 24-hour period before giving birth, the host starts to feel unwell. Its speed is halved, and its disadvantage on attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws. At birth, the tadpole chews its way through the vital organs and out of the host's chest in one round, killing the host in the process. What's horrifying about that? Hey, what's up, David? Yeah, I bet Slob would go well in your campaign, right? You've got that like planes hopping thing. Yeah, that'd be cool. What's weird about the Slod tadpole is that like there's nothing in here that says like you don't know until 24 hours beforehand. So like, oh my god, that sucks. I mean, it's great because you only you know, and you're not really even necessarily aware that the Slod does that because it's just a claw attack. You make a Constitution save at the time. But then are you told when that happens? Like, oh, you have a Slod egg in you. Because it's there for 3 months. So it's presumed that, like, you forget about it, right? Okay, interesting. All right, so how do we model that? I think there's some good stuff there. I like the you can only carry 1 egg at a time. You can only carry 1 tadpole at a time. Over 3 months, the egg moves to the chest cavity. So what's the like time frame, do we think, on that? I should have looked at it. Over the time frame. So here was my idea, right? Was that like over the course of the disease, you make intelligence saving throws, you know, every 24 hours or whatever. Every 24 hours. Oh, are there different ones for the red slot? Or the blue slot? Yeah, blue slot says that it's got Chaos Plague, which I think is just like a disease. Can't regain hit points. Hit point maximum is reduced. Then they turn into a red slot. Oh, interesting. A green slot. Huh. They're so weird. Yeah, I've never used them. They're cool. Like, I have nothing against them. I've never found a way into my games before. You make intelligence saving throw every 24 hours. Your intelligence is reduced. I kind of think, man, like your intelligence is reduced at various stages, and each time you gain a new personality trait, right? Like the traits of the Mind Flayer. When your intelligence is reduced to 0, the tadpole is full grown. Yeah, exactly, Nuker Wolf. We're on the same page here. We're on the same page. The tadpole bursts through the face. And the transformation begins in earnest. Burst to the face, the target dies, and the transformation of the target dies. And the transformation begins in earnest, right? Because I like the idea of there being that weird interstitial stage. I think what we might do, for the sake of time, is we might not actually do a template. It takes a week? Okay, that's awesome to know. The course of the week. I forget, honestly. It probably said it in that thing that I skimmed, and I should have read more closely. Should have read closer. Yeah, over the course of the week. But yeah, I kind of think like there's a new, I think you 100% do that, Nuker. You make a chart of the different things. So I think rather than making the template, I think we'll just do Ceramorphosis as a disease as presented in 5th edition, right? Like if this happens to you, this is the timeline you have, and this is what happens to you like over the course of the thing, right? And it's like every 24 hours your intelligence is reduced. You know, so if you are have a lower intelligence, if you're a Dumbo, then it takes less time, right? There's not as much to eat. Which is funny because then it like equates intelligence to the physical size of the brain. It can be removed, presumably with a greater restoration, you know, or a heal spell. Can be removed with a greater restoration or heal spell. Okay, great. And then the last thing, let's codify what we want these like brain eating powers to do. So what I like about the way we have it framed right now, because that madness chart might be fun to write here on stream actually. Ooh, you know what though? We could probably just go and take traits from the one in Volos. You know, we come up with a few of our own, but the Volos has the like flaws and goals and things. right? You just roll on that trait, and that becomes those replace your character's personality traits, right? As you slowly become this Mind Flayer. I think that's actually the right answer, because then we can, you know, you can cheat a little bit. So what I like about the way we've kind of engineered this right now is that the Mind Flayer has a choice when it gets to the brain, right? It can either eat the brain and gain the knowledge and gain temporary hit points, or it can make a thrall, right? So maybe we did already talk about this. So then the brain thing is like, Fry, you've got that brain thing. Brain benefits. Why can't we just be brains with benefits? If the Mind Flayer eats a brain. How do baby eats a brain? They gain temporary hit points to equal to their the creature's intelligence. To the creature's intelligence. In addition, they have access. Ooh. That's pretty gruesome, David. Yeah, just put them out of their misery. Oof, that's dark. In addition, they have access to all the creature's memories and secrets. If the Mind Flayer is connected to an Elder Brain. So does it and all other Mind Flayers connected to that brain. If the brain belonged to a spellcaster, the Mind Flayer can steal 1d4 plus 1 spell slots from uncast spells from the caster's spell list. Oh, I see. People are still okay because you can see them through. Ooh, yeah. I think paladin immunity to disease. Well, I don't know. Because, like, is it actually a disease? What do you think, Shadowrunner? I think purity of body. Because, like, what happens? Like, they put the thing in you. I mean, I think there's something cool about them putting the tadpole in, and then you just, like, bleh, like spit it back out. It's like, no, man. Fucking try again. I think that's cool. I think that works. Yeah. I think that, you know, paladins and monks are, creatures with immunity to disease. Like, spit out the tadpoles. Within 24 hours of being implanted. Great. Okay, I think that's what we have there. So what's tricky is Warforged doesn't have a flesh brain. Let's go to the stat block and let's put in the legendary actions. I think the thralls thing. So we'll need to make a thrall stat block, right? Which we can do that. We got some time. So yeah, we need to make a thrall stat block. We need to upgrade the Mind Flayer stat block. We need to I think there's like a sidebar that talks about thralls and the abilities they give, which is kind of how they do the coven. And then although yeah. So what actually are the legendary actions of the Mind Flayer? So if it has thrall. So these should all be thrall related, right? Because that's the only reason they get these legendary actions. So legendary actions. I think like a thrall moves half its speed and makes a melee attack, right, against a creature. The interpose doesn't work because that's a reaction, not a legendary action. Legendary actions happen in between turns, but not not on turns, so it's got to be something else. Yeah, the Mind Flayer can kill a Thrall, to trigger a Psychic Death Burst. It's one more. Because the other thing is a reaction, right? It's not a legendary action. So we got to think of like one more. It moves them all. It like repositions them. Maybe it's like a Thrall makes a melee attack. Right? All the Thralls can move up to half their speed. Oh, it can totally be more. So in the sidebar, we're going to talk about this, but the idea is that whenever the Mind Flayer takes damage, it has to make a concentration check, right? And on a failure, its Thralls are stunned for one round until the end of its next turn or whatever. So that way, and then the more Thralls it has, the higher the DC of that save, right? So if it only has one Thrall, the chances are pretty good it's going to do well on that save. If it has a bunch of Thralls, the DC gets a lot higher. It gets a lot harder for the Mind Flayer to do it. Cool. I think that's neat. I like all of that. So let's see if we can go into the stat block and put in at least the stat block related things. So the legendary actions, the changes to the brain, all that stuff. And then if we have time, we'll make a Thrall. And if we have time, we can... I think I'll do the like sidebar and the disease on my own. But let's get in here. Okay, so everything here seems fine. The only thing I would maybe consider is changing their concentration, because right now, if it's a Constitution save, they're not the best at it, right? Like, maybe we could do a thing where we lose magic resistance, which honestly I've always felt it's a little bit weird. Like, I guess they do hate arcane magic, so that might be it. But I just worry about if they only have a +1 bonus on their concentration check, then they're probably going to be losing these Thralls pretty commonly. Maybe that's good. You know, they are pretty powerful with the Thralls. You know, maybe it should be easier to get to them. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think we should leave it at +1 for their constitution, or do you think we should give them proficiency in the save? Because it wouldn't be humongous, right? It would be like, what's their bonus? It would be like +4. To Constitution, which like I think is fine, but I'll let you guys decide. So Tentacle Attack should be fine. Oh, let's get in here and let's change this. There's a problem. 2D10. Add action. Update stat block. Cool. 2d10 +4 psychic damage. The target is medium or smaller. It's grappled. That's all fine. If this damages the target to 0 hit points, the Mind Flayer can either kill the target, can choose. Ooh, Warcaster. What's Warcaster? I forget. Choose to either kill the target and devour the brain, or they can transform them into a Thrall. What I like about this too is the way that it's worded, and we'll put that, we'll fill that out a little bit more. The way this is worded is that like you could have a scenario where a Mind Flayer doesn't have a Thrall, and then in the combat grabs a creature, turns them into a Thrall, and gains legendary actions. You know what I mean? I think that's really actually kind of cool that there's this like my final form thing. Let's get back in here and change this. So the Thrall stuff I'm gonna leave out of Extract Brain. I think for Extract Brain, I'm gonna describe this stuff, the like brain benefits. If the Mind Flayer devours the brain, it gains temporary hit points equal to the intelligence score of the creature whose brain it ate. Of the slain creature. Yeah, I think of the slain creature is fine. Of the slain creature. In addition, it learns any secrets
or memories. Advantage on concentration check for spells. Cool. Yeah. I might get rid of magic resistance and put that in because it seems like too much to have both. But yeah, that's great. Cool, thank you to Army Kid. Sorry that I don't know the feats very well. It learns any secrets or memories the target knew in life, and if the Mind Flayer is connected to an Elder Brain, the Elder Brain and all other Mind Flayers that share a connection with it also learn. Share a connection with it. Also learn this information. Okay, add action. It's a big one now. It's a big boy. There you go. Okay, and then let's put Warcaster in. We're gonna get rid of magic resistance because I actually kind of think it's better to do the opposite and say that they're like susceptible to spells, right? Oh, we don't have Warcaster. Okay. Thank you to Army Kid. I will just copy your text over and change it to the Mind Flayer has. The Mind Flayer has advantage on Constitution saving throws made to maintain their concentration on psionic links when they take damage. Warcaster. It would have to have some cool ability like some cool name. Iron Mind. Something like that. Add ability. I'm gonna put it above innate spellcasting, even though alphabetically it doesn't go there. But innate spellcasting almost always comes last. Cool. I like that. And then let's put in those legendary actions. So let's assume that it's got thralls. If the Mind Flayer controls at least one thrall, it can take 3 legendary actions using the options below. Only one legendary action option can be used at a time, and only at the end of another creature's turn. See how it still says the Behir in here? The Mind Flayer regains spend legendary actions at the start of its turn. Okay. So what did we say for its legendary actions? We said Thrall makes a melee attack against a creature. Slam. One Thrall makes a melee attack against a creature it can reach. And that is legendary action. It's a pretty simple one. Reposition. All the Mind Flayers, Thralls move up to half their speed. Can move up to half their speed. Add legendary action. These are pretty simple, but they've also got a bunch of other things they can do because they have the what's the, like, requisition? Like, what's the term for like liquidate? Yeah, liquidate. Oh, that's so gross because it's like turning their brain to jelly. The Mind Flayer reduces one Thrall within 60 feet to 0 hit points, triggering its psionic death throws. It's psionic. It's psychic burst. Psionic burst. Yeah, psionic burst ability. We'll say this takes 2 actions. Costs 2 actions. I'm gonna keep the other one as costs 1 action, reposition, even though it seems good, but they provoke opportunity attacks when they do that, right? So kind of evens itself out. Okay, hey, look at that. So it's got Iron Mind, innate spellcasting, tentacles. The Extract Brain is a little bit longer. Mind Blast is the same. It's honestly not that different of a monster.
it's just those thralls, right? So I honestly would be tempted to say that it's like CR8, you know? Because they lost magic resistance, which is pretty powerful, and it gained a few things, but it is, yeah, it's kind of splitting the difference between those two. But what you'll do is then you'll add up all the thralls, right? So if it has a bunch of thralls, then that changes it. A thrall template. So yeah, what I was thinking, Shadowrunner, is that rather than a thrall template, I mean, you know, maybe you do it. Maybe that's the answer. Because I was just gonna say it's a creature. It's like you stat up a CR1 humanoid, because like technically the Mind Flayer can only eat a humanoid's brain, right? So it can't do a giant. It's got to be a humanoid. Revised Mind Flayer CR12, cleaning up a dog mess CR20. Oh no, I'm sorry, Vaughn. Yeah, we made a lot of changes while you were gone, dude. We actually ended up keeping the CR relatively low. I think you would be pleased, because we're putting a big emphasis on the Mind Flayer's thralls. So Shadowrunner raises a good point. Do you guys think it should be a standard stat block that's just like it turns into a thrall? Which, like, I think that's probably easier, because if this happens in the moment, you know, it's going to be hard to, like, apply a template to your character, you know? And the range of creatures it could be is pretty small, you know what I mean? So, like, it might not make tons of sense if, like, okay, you know, we turned this 20th level fighter into a thrall and he's got 13 strength or whatever. But that's kind of my instinct, because I think that's quicker and easier in the moment, and that it's more of a flavor thing. Like, oh god, it's this legendary hero who's been turned into a thrall, and like he has 13 strength because he's not fighting very well. You know what I mean? He's just kind of like throwing his arms or his weapons around. He doesn't have any of the skills that he used to have. So I kind of think you take a page out of like a White's book, and you just have it be like, when it slays a creature, it turns them into another creature, because it's much easier just hand somebody the stat block to a thrall and say, this is you now, you do whatever the Mind Flayer tells you to do, than it is to say, okay, run your character sheet through this checklist, you know? So, because I think template would also work too, but the way it's written here, like, giants don't, you know, they're not a target. Humanoids are the only option. I mean, you're right in the sense that, like, if you did a Dragonborn, wouldn't have a dragon's breath and stuff like that, you know. But I think you could hand wave it in such a way where that wouldn't really matter. So let's save this, and we're gonna view the image and do all that stuff. So I got this saved, that way I can put this up on the up on our Patreon, which you should go check out if you are not a patron already. And now we're gonna do the thrall. So we're gonna base it off of a CR1 creature, I think. Let me find a CR1 like symbol. I'm gonna look at the zombie, frankly. Oops, because I think the zombie is like a good touchstone. The hit points are interesting, right? Because it's like, just dominate and can save. Well, yeah, you've missed a little bit, Vaughn, because half of their brain has been devoured, so they can't save to end it. Yeah. Let me look at the zombie. Zombie. Zombie is a CR1 quarter, which doesn't seem like enough to me. Vampire spawn's like a CR5, so that's too powerful, I think. We gotta split that difference. Like, what's a good Zambies? Let's start with the zombie, and then we'll just increase it. But yeah, we're basically gonna replace them with this other creature. You know, kind of like how a lot of undead do this, right? If they kill you, they bring you back as a slightly lesser form of undead. So let's pull up the Zambi. Zambi. Here we go. Okay, so we're gonna call this Thrall. Medium type is humanoid, because it has to be a humanoid. I don't think it's an aberration. It just has a humanoid with half of its brain missing. I think it is unaligned. It is CR1. Yeah, veteran's like CR3 though, right? I think 13 strength is good. Honestly, I think most of these stats are pretty decent. I'm gonna bring the constitution down, but like I like the idea as a like I like the idea that it's not that these people are getting stronger or less, or like, you know, their strength scores aren't changing, really. They maybe functionally are, but it's more the idea that, like, they are, they're not acting the way they normally would. So they might have more hit points or fewer or whatever, but it's because they're not doing anything. They're not trying to avoid getting hit. They're just, like, letting themselves get smacked, right? Like, again, it's like a zombie. It's like if you turned a 20th level fighter into a zombie, he wouldn't get to keep his stuff, his hit points, his strength. He just becomes a zombie. And I think that's sort of what we're doing here too, right? Like, it's cleaner that way. Intelligence, I think, is 0. I think they have no intelligence. It's just their will is completely the Mind Flayer's will. I think they have 6 wisdom is fine. I think charisma is also way lower. It's like 3. It's just terrible, right? They're awful stats. So they could easily be like cast spells on and stuff, but I think they have a bunch of they are immune to being charmed. They are immune to being exhausted. They are immune to being frightened. Yeah, TV brainwashed zombie, exactly. They are immune to being stunned. No, because they can be stunned. They can also be knocked unconscious. Maybe it's just charmed, exhausted. It's like emotional stuff, right? Paralyzed, petrified, poisoned. I think they can be poisoned. Yeah, that's fine. What if they're immune to psychic damage? That's cool. Because they don't have any brains left. It doesn't understand none. It understands no languages, only telepathy. Great. It's got no dark vision for sure. It's CR1. And so its powers are what? It's got that. I definitely think it has the slam power, which I want to increase its attack because it's... Oh, it would be +3 if we're CR1. Let's go back to 1 column. I think that's fine for this. It's got the slam. It's got... What do we call it? We called it psychic... Oh, shoot. I just closed it. Let me see if I can pull it up. We called it like psychic burst or psychic blast or something like that. Oh, here it is. Okay. Psionic. Well, I disagree that exhaustion isn't emotional. I think it is totally in your head. But I think the point is that they would keep going beyond that, right? It wouldn't affect them. They don't have any personality. They don't have any willpower. Does it? Ooh, sense thoughts, really good. That's neat. Yeah. Blindside's good too. I like the idea that the thralls have some small abilities that the Mind Flayer doesn't have. You know what I mean? That it's like the thralls are like little sensors that the Mind Flayer can send out. So the Mind Flayer can't sense thought, but the little like thralls that it's connected to are little beacons. Yeah, that's actually really cool. I like the idea of it not just being like it's just a zombie. It's got a couple of little traits that the Mind Flayer desires or wants, and that's why they make them, right? Yeah, I like them having like 10 feet of blindside. I think is cool, where it's like very close range, like a little bit of psychic radar, and that's kind of playing into that. They're not blind beyond it, I don't think. Maybe they are. I don't know. No, I don't think so. I think they have 10 feet of blindside, little psychic radar, but I like it being really short. So let's do sense thought. Is it detect thought? I forget how they call it. Sense thought sounds right. Sense magic. I know that the intellect devourer has it. But here, before I get distracted, let's do the death burst thing. So let's look for a method and copy their death burst over. Method death burst. Okay. So add ability. Oop, shoot. Nope. Death burst. Oh, we called it psionic burst. When the thrall dies. Ooh, they could be. Yeah, I like that. Oh, is that one of its legendary actions? Oh, that's really good. I like that better than like reposition. Does it eat a thrall and gain some health? Ooh. I mean, that's pretty similar to liquidate, right? Where it pops one for the burst.
But I like them eating the other half of the brain. That it's like they haven't decided. It's like leftovers, right? Like, maybe I'll eat it, maybe I'll save it. These are good, Vaughn. Okay, let me do this, but I will come back to that. It explodes its head explodes. Its head explodes in a burst of psychic agony. Psychic agony. Each creature with, I'm gonna make the radius bigger. We're gonna say within 15 feet of it must make a wisdom, a DC. We're gonna say 12 wisdom saving throw, taking 2d6 psychic damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. I might go bigger. I think we're gonna go 3d6. So that would be 10. Yeah, it's gotta be like, there's gonna be a bomb worth dropping. You know what I mean? Because if it's a whole thrall that they're losing, and it's very hard to get those. Well, so here's the deal, Vaughn, is that I also, like, I don't think exhaustion is gonna come up ever. Exhaustion is one of those things that, like, doesn't I'll just have half a brain. Yeah, exactly. Oof, I've got that got that lunch, that food baby. I think we can't have it be stun, because stun is a part of the action economy for the Mind Flayer, is that if it takes damage, it has to make a saving throw, and if a concentration save, and if it fails, then all of its thralls are stunned. So it can't be immune to stun. I don't think exhaustion is like that important. It's not gonna come up, right? Like, I can't remember a single time when exhaustion has ever affected one of my monsters. But let's put these other cool ideas in. So we got the blind sight, and then we wanted to go back into if I had half a brain. Oh yeah, okay, we gotta save this dude. Save stamp. Like, this is gonna be a little confusing, but we're gonna load in our other Mind Flayer. Pardon my rearranging here. Mind Flayer, is this the one? I think this is the one. See, and that's what's so great. You can load in monsters you have saved. So we're gonna change Slam, and we're gonna make that one thrall moves up to half its speed, and makes an attack against a creature it can reach. We're gonna add that as a legendary action, and then we're gonna get rid of reposition, and we're gonna put like finish off. What's a good one? Devour. I want like a joke about like snack or something like that, right? Like morsel. Devour morsel. I kind of like finish off, because I think that implies both killing something and eating it. And we're gonna say this costs 2. I think 2 is fine. I was thinking about 3, but it would have to be adjacent to the thrall anyway. I wonder if you do a cranium rat thing with them in appearance, where their like skull is still open, like they don't close the skull again, so the brain is actually right there. The Mind Flayer can just reach in and eat it, right? The Mind Flayer devours the remains of the thrall's brain. Killing it instantly, but not triggering its tea time, its death burst, or its psionic burst. The Mind Flayer gains temporary hit points. Ooh, does it? Because that's the thing. It doesn't have any intelligence left, right? Yeah, it gains temporary hit points equal to the hit points equal to the target's original intelligence, and learns any of its secrets as per the extract brain power. He had a man. Can the Flayer perceive through these? I was thinking about that. Yeah, that might be kind of cool, doing like a
doing a familiar thing, right? You can see through the eyes. As per the extract brain power, Mind Flayer. Yeah, let's do this. And gains the benefits of its extract brain power. The thrall dies instantly, but does not trigger the psionic burst. Yeah, that's fine. Foodie. Yeah, that was something we talked about with in the show, in the podcast, was the idea of like Mind Flayers having particular tastes. Like, does this Mind Flayer like hopeful people? Does this Mind Flayer like fear or love, or like what emotions do they like farm in their victims? You know, ugh, messed up. Okay, so let's save that stat block. Now this is the new Mind Flayer. I wanted to put life sense back on the thrall, so we're gonna load the thrall back in, and we're gonna put that in there. This is so good, you guys. What a good stream today. It was so lovely to have you all. Thank you for coming out. I don't know if this is something you guys can do regularly, but I was like right on the verge of stopping this stream because I was like, no one comes to these monster workshops. And then it was great. Look at all you. I mean, it helps that it's like a big heavy hitter. They're doing the Mind Flayer, but still. Next week is a good one though too. We're gonna do the Beholder. So I will be here next week, and we will be doing the Beholder. So that'll be a great one. Let's put Sense Life. How does Sense Life work? So I think, David, if we do that they can perceive through the thralls, we'll put that in the sidebar, kind of like with the Hag's Coven. Yeah, that's a great idea too. I'll make a note of that. Let's get the Intellect of Ours Sense Life ability. I think it's relatively short. I don't think it's as good as an Intellect of Ours, but I like them being kind of similar because they are sort of similar monsters. Here we go. Detect Sentience is the name of it. Detect Sentience. Okay. The thrall can detect the presence, can sense the presence. Does this Mind Flayer like musicians or athletes? Exactly. Like, what is its taste? It's a gourmand. The presence, and location of any creature within, I'm gonna say 100 feet rather than 300, so we reduce it, of it, that has an intelligence score. An intelligence score. Yeah, Beholders next week, so swing by. I like the standard Beholder. That's kind of I don't want to spoil it, but that's kind of the conclusion that I come to in the episode, is that, like, it's the standard Beholder that's, like, I think pretty great. But it's the variants I'm not crazy about. So I think a lot of our work next week is going to be on the Death Tyrant and the Spectator. Yeah. I think the Beholder as it is, there's not a lot you can do to mess with it. It is hit or miss is a good point though. Regardless of interposing barriers. Interposing barriers. Unless the target. Okay. It's I got a little bit of a janky setup here. I apologize. Okay, we're good. There'll be a little bit of a lag. Stand by. Unless the creature is protected by a mind blank spell. Cool. Yeah. Ooh, just Jackdaw has a nice Beholder mix with a Pokemon. What? What does that mean? How do you mix it with a Pokemon? I think that's pretty good for the Thrall for CR1. Maybe we'll give it a few more hit points. I think that might be good. Let's give it like 10. Ugh. Yeah, let's give it let's give it like 2 more hit dice. Mind Witness is very scary. 32. I think that's pretty good. Or a CR1. Like, yeah, let's look at like another CR1. What's another CR1 monster? To give us an idea. Definitely not a Kobold. Definitely not a Kraken. You think here we go. Koto Whip. Koto Whip has got 65 hit points. Wow. Maybe we need more hit points for the Thrall. I think 32 is plenty, but maybe at the level at which you're fighting it, right?
Yeah, maybe we're off in our hit point assumption here. The quad drone only has 22, but I guess it can fly. I don't know how to calculate this stuff. We're just gonna say that 32 is plenty for the thrall. Great, because the thing is, you're almost never gonna encounter one of these on its own. You know what I mean? You're always gonna, it's gonna be in some way packaged with a Mind Flayer. Great, so let's save the stat block. Yeah. Let's see. I think, oh, we wanted to add the Mind Flayer can, it can also sense sentience. It can also detect sentience through them. Yeah, cool. I think then, I know we're not quite done. They're always purchased in bulk. Yeah, that's the hope. Because I thought about doing it as a template where it was like you would apply this to, like, because the idea of a oh yes, that's right. I think that goes in the sidebar, right? Although maybe it should be in the stat block. No, I think it'll go in the sidebar, because that's where, like, concentration and all that stuff goes. That'll be in the sidebar, and we'll put that there and leave it at that. But thank you for reminding me, Shadow, and I think we have that in here. Yeah, I think that's it. We have technically like 10 minutes, but I want to just sit down and write Ceramorphosis myself. That's probably not as much fun to watch me just, like, putz over language. But I think that's the new Mind Flayer. I think that's really cool. I think that really gives it that, like, I'm so happy, Lex, with your idea. Like, Vaughn kind of initially set the tone of, like, well, shouldn't it just have minions? Why does it need to be CR12? And I think by what this does is this lets us have the Ulithyrid. It lets us have the Ulithyrid exist and be different and have different powers while also having the Mind Flayer feel like it's cooler, right? They're useful tools more than food, yeah. But it's like, ugh, this isn't what I like to eat. Like, I will eat like an eggplant if I have to, but yeah, I don't have a taste for it. Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, this gives us this third option. You can do the Ulithyrid, you can do the Mind Flayer, or you can, like, and the idea that a Mind Flayer can, like, yeah, Kale is an even better example. Or you can, like, upgrade your existing Mind Flayer by giving them a bunch of thralls, right? It gives them new powers that they can do. So they can channel stuff through them and all that kind of thing. Yeah, that's cool. I love it. I think that's where we're going to end for today on the Mind Flayer. So I'll process all of this. My sister is coming into town tomorrow, so I might not get a chance to put the Mind Flayer up before Sunday, but I promise I will work on it and get it ready. That way y'all can come and check it out on Sunday. I just want to say thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. Look at this chat. Ooh, Thrall Master. That's cool. Yeah, it's like a different version of it, because there's so many versions of the Mind Flayer. But thanks, everybody. Thanks, Lex and Shadowner and Fawn, Nuker Wolf. David was here for a bit. 2Army Kid. All these people. Thank you so much. If you like the content that I make, please consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already subscribed. I assume that everyone in the chat is probably subscribed, but if you are watching this on VOD, we very much appreciate that subscription. Go ahead and check out our other content. We have a bunch of other videos on the channel. You can also find me on Twitter at XP Web Series. We have a Discord. We also have a Patreon. And if you like this monster and you want to see the full implementation of it, thank you, Vaughn. You want to see the full implementation of it, then go ahead and subscribe there. At $1, you can get access to this and all the other monsters we've done for this series. At $5, you get access to the Trove, which is a big pile of all the content I've made over the past, like, 4 years for this Patreon. So go check that out. It's totally worth it. It's considering how much you get, I feel like it's a pretty good deal. $1 a month for all these new monsters and access to early episodes of the podcast, which you should also listen to. Did you guys know I have a lot of content? I'm also a professional dungeon master, so if you visit my website, pro-dm.net, you can hire me to run a game for you, maybe even featuring this horrifying new Mind Flayer that we've made. In terms of my future streaming schedule, I will be off on Sunday. We normally do a world building stream, but my sister will still be in town. And Tuesday is an adventure prep stream that is currently up in the air. She flies back kind of middle of the day, and depending on the airport situation, what's going on, I'm not sure. Probably I won't stream on Tuesday, but there might be a surprise one. So worst case scenario, the next time I will see you will be next week.
next Thursday, right here, doing the Beholder stream. Speaking of Beholders, last little plug for the Patreon. If you are interested in that episode and you are not a patron, $1 gets you access to early episodes, and the Beholder episode drops tomorrow. So get on that if you are not already a patron. I'm going to have to puss with OBS here before I can get out of here, but thank you, everybody. Lex, Shadowner, Nuker Wolf, Two Army Kid, and David. I was like, I missed somebody, for coming and hanging out. It was awesome to have all of your input. My Mind Flayer would have been a lot worse if I hadn't had all of your excellent input. And I'm excited to show you guys the final form. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy adventuring. And there goes my camera.